In a fit of rage, I falsely reported my boyfriend for harassment, but it is over now. I dropped the charges. But for some reason, he does not want to forgive me, and he is going to cancel the wedding. Are you not being a little dramatic? I am writing this with shaking hands and a feeling of total disbelief. My fiancé, Marcos, the man I was supposed to spend the rest of my life with, is undoing our future, our wedding, our 5 years of history, and all for a mistake. A stupid, impulsive, and horrible mistake, I admit, but a mistake that I have already fixed. I cannot understand how he can be so drastic, so unforgiving. For you to understand why his reaction is so exaggerated, you need to understand our relationship. Marcos and I have always been fire and gasoline. Our connection is incredibly passionate. When we are good, the whole world seems technicolor. We are that couple that laughs too loudly, that kisses in public, that lives their love with an intensity that sometimes scares our quieter friends. But that same passion that fuels our love also fuels our fights. We have always argued big, yelling, slamming doors, dramatic words. I admit, have a strong temper. When I get angry, I see red. I say things I do not mean, I do things I later regret. But Marcos has always known that. He has always understood that my outbursts are just that, outbursts, storms that pass as quickly as they arrive. And afterward always came the reconciliation, which was just as intense and passionate. It was our cycle, our dance. He was the calm that anchored my storm. We got engaged a year ago. It was a natural step. We both knew that, despite our drama, we were meant for each other. We were planning a big wedding for 3 months from now. The dress was bought, the venue was booked, the invitations were sent. We were in the home stretch. Last week we had the mother of all fights. It started over something silly. He had made plans with his friends to watch a game, and I felt he was not giving me enough attention amid the stress of the wedding. The argument escalated. Yelling accusations. I told him he was selfish. He told me I was a drama queen. At one point, fed up with the screaming, he grabbed his car keys and said, "I need air. I am going for a drive." And he walked out the door. Normally, this was the point where I would stay at home, furious, waiting for him to come back for the reconciliation phase. But that night something in me broke. His calm, his ability to simply leave in the middle of my emotional storm seemed to me the ultimate act of abandonment. I felt powerless, ignored, and my anger, having nowhere to go, transformed into something much darker and more destructive. I wanted to hurt him. I wanted him to feel a fraction of the panic and helplessness that I was feeling. And in that state of temporary madness, I had the worst idea of my life. As I listened to the engine of Marcos's car drive away, I stood in the middle of the living room, trembling with a rage I did not know how to process. I felt completely abandoned. How dared he leave? To leave me alone with all that fury. His escape seemed to me an act of supreme contempt, as if my feelings were not important enough for him to stay and face them. In my mind, his action of going for a drive transformed into something sinister. What if he does not come back? I thought. What if he is with someone else? My brain, poisoned by anger, began to concoct the worst possible scenarios. I was not thinking clearly, I was not myself. I was a version of me dominated by panic and spite. And then I saw his phone. He had left it on the coffee table in his haste to leave and, next to it, the photo of the two of us smiling from our last vacation. The sight of that distant happiness at that moment was like pouring gasoline on the fire. I wanted him to come back. I wanted to force him to face me. And in that state of irrationality an idea occurred to me, a terrible, disproportionate idea, but one that in my feverish mind seemed the only way to regain control. I picked up my own phone, I dialed the police number. My heart was pounding, but it was a beat of adrenaline, not fear. When the operator answered, the words tumbled out of my mouth before I could stop them. "I want to report harassment," I said, my voice sounding strangely calm. "My boyfriend, my ex-boyfriend, just left the house after a fight. He has been following me. He will not leave me alone. I am scared." I made up a story. I said we had broken up a week ago, which in my fighting mind felt like a half-truth, that he did not accept it, that he was sending me threatening messages, and that night he had come to my house and we had argued. I gave his full name, the description of his car, his license plate. As I spoke, a part of me knew I was crossing a line from which there was no return, but the other part, the one that was hurt and furious, felt powerful. I was no longer the abandoned girlfriend. I was the victim that the system had to protect. I was forcing the world to take my pain seriously. I did not think about the real consequences. I did not think about a criminal record, about his job, about his reputation. In my mind, this was just a tactic, an extreme move on our emotional chessboard. The police would stop him, give him a scare, and he would realize that he could not just leave when things got tough. He would come home scared and sorry, and then we could have our reconciliation. It was a shock plan, a radical therapy for our relationship. I hung up the phone and sat on the sofa, waiting. I expected a call from a scared Marcos. I expected the siren of a police car in the distance to give me the signal that my plan was underway. I did not feel guilty, I felt justified. I had responded to his abandonment with an equally dramatic action. We were even. Or at least that is what my feverish and enraged mind was telling me at that moment. The reality of what I had done did not take long to arrive, and it was not as I had imagined it in my revenge fantasy. I did not receive a scared call from Marcos. I received a call from his father 2 hours later. His voice, normally so warm and fatherly with me, was a sheet of ice. "Anna, it is me. I am at the downtown police station. You need to come here right now and tell these people the truth. They have arrested Marcos." The word arrested shot through me like an electric shock. Arrested. Not detained for questioning. Not scared. Arrested. Suddenly, the fantasy shattered and the gravity of my act hit me with the force of a concrete wall. I drove to the station in a state of absolute panic. The rage had evaporated, replaced by an icy fear. What had I done? This was not a game. This was real. I found his father in the waiting room. He did not even look at me. "Talk to that officer," he said, nodding his head. "And fix it." I approached the policeman, trembling. I explained that there had been a terrible misunderstanding, that we had had a fight, that I was hysterical, and that I had exaggerated things. I told him there was no harassment, that I was not afraid of Marcos, that he was the kindest man in the world and that, please, they should let him go. The officer looked at me with a mixture of pity and contempt. "Miss, filing a false report is a very serious crime. You have set a lot of resources in motion for a fit of rage. We are going to need you to make a formal statement retracting everything." I spent the next hour in a small room, telling the humiliating truth to a detective who looked at me as if I were scum. Finally, after endless paperwork, they let Marcos go. When he came out, he did not look like the same man who had left the house a few hours earlier. He was pale, his clothes were wrinkled, but the worst part was his gaze. When his eyes met mine, there was no anger or pain. There was nothing. It was an empty gaze, that of a stranger, as if he were looking right through me. "Marcos, I began, tears streaming down my face. "I am so sorry, I was not thinking. I went crazy. It was a horrible mistake." He said nothing, he simply looked at me with that empty expression. His father came over, put a hand on his shoulder, and led him away. I watched him walk down the hallway without looking back even once. The next morning, I returned to the apartment, expecting to find him there, expecting the fight, the screaming, the storm that would precede the calm. But the house was silent. I went to the police station again, alone, and formally dropped the charges, signing an affidavit that my original complaint had been false. I felt a wave of relief. It is done, I thought. I have fixed it. The mistake is erased. Now we can start to heal. I sent a text message to Marcos. Everything is fixed now. I have dropped the charges. It was crazy, I know. Please come home so we can talk. I love you. Hey, if you're enjoying this story, consider subscribing to the Chismosaureo. I bring stories like this every day. Now then, let us continue with the gossip. I was sure that now that the legal misunderstanding was resolved, we could go back to our cycle, to our normality. I did not understand that I had not just broken a rule of our relationship, I had detonated a nuclear bomb in the center of his life, and I expected him to come home to sweep up the ashes with me. Marcos did not reply to my message, nor to the next one, nor to the 10 calls I made to him that day. His silence was a punishment worse than any scream. 2 days later, he returned to the apartment, but not to stay. He came with his best friend, and they started putting his things in boxes. I followed him around the house like a shadow, begging, crying, trying to make him reason. "Marcos, please, talk to me," I would say. I know it was horrible. I know it was the worst thing I have ever done, but I have already fixed it. The charges are dropped. Legally, nothing has happened. We can forget it and move on. He kept packing with a methodical calm that was driving me crazy. He would not look at me. It was as if I were an annoying background noise. "Forget it," he finally said without stopping. His voice was flat. "Do you think I can forget spending 3 hours in a cell? That I was fingerprinted and had a mugshot taken? That I had to call my father to bail me out of jail? Because my fiancé had falsely reported me. But it was a mistake born of anger," I insisted. "It was not me. You know how I get. You have always understood. This time it got out of hand, but it is fixed now." He stopped and finally turned to look at me, and the empty gaze he had at the station had been replaced by something else, a deep pain, but also an unshakable resolve. "That is the problem, Anna. That you still think this is like our other fights. That this is something that is fixed with an apology and a passionate reconciliation. This is not a fight, this is not drama. This is something else." He gestured towards the boxes. "Our fights, your door slamming, your outbursts. I always thought they were just noise, part of your passion, but I have realized they are not. They are a warning of what you are capable of when you lose control. And now I know how far you can go. It will not happen again," I cried. "I have learned my lesson." "I am glad for you," he said. And in his voice there was no sarcasm, only an infinite sadness. "But I cannot risk it. I cannot live with the fear of what your next outburst will be." "What will be next, Anna? Calling my work and saying I am a thief? Telling my family a horrible lie about me? You have shown that there are no limits for you when you feel hurt, and I cannot live in a minefield." He picked up the phone and started making a call. "I am going to call the wedding venue to cancel it," he said as if he were talking about the weather. Panic seized me. "Cancel the wedding? No, Marcos, you cannot do that. It was a mistake, a horrible mistake. But I love you and I know you love me." He hung up the phone and looked at me. "Yes, I love you. And that is the most messed up part of all this. But sometimes love is not enough. Sometimes you have to walk away from the person you love to save yourself. And I need to save myself from you." There was nothing I could say. He was not reacting to the fight. He was reacting to the revelation of who I am at my worst, and he had decided he could not live with that person. He did not understand that that person was not me. It was just a temporary, crazy version of me, a version that was already gone, that had repented. But for him, that version was now the only one he could see. Marcos left. He took his boxes, his clothes, his books, and with them he took our future. I have spent the last week in a state of shock, making the calls he did not want to make. Canceling the catering, the florist, the photographer. Explaining to my mother that there will be no wedding. Every conversation is a new wave of humiliation. And in the midst of all this chaos, I still cannot understand his logic. I get it. He was angry, he was hurt, he had every right to be. But canceling the wedding, ending a 5-year relationship, is that not a completely disproportionate reaction? I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, born of anger and panic. But as soon as my head cooled down, I did everything I could to fix it. I recanted, I dropped the charges, I apologized. What else am I supposed to do? Does regret not count for anything? Do the 5 years of love we built not count for anything? He talks about limits and fear. But is not love also about forgiving each other's worst moments? He always knew I was temperamental, passionate, sometimes to an extreme. It was part of what he loved about me, and now he uses that very quality against me like an incurable disease. I feel incredibly betrayed. He has judged and sentenced me for my worst moment, ignoring all the good ones. He has taken an action that lasted 5 minutes of madness and turned it into the definition of my entire person. And yes, what I did was serious, but it is in the past now. The charges are dropped. Legally, the problem has disappeared. The only thing left is his resentment, his refusal to forgive. He is actively choosing to keep this mistake alive, to use it as a reason to destroy us. Are you not being a little dramatic? People make mistakes. People say and do horrible things in moments of anger. The true character of a person and a relationship is shown in the ability to overcome those things. And he has shown that he does not have that ability. His love for me was weaker than his fear. So here I am, alone, without a fiancé, without a wedding, with my reputation in tatters, and all because, in a moment of weakness, I made a mistake that I have already fixed. He prefers to cling to the memory of that night than to the 5 years of love I gave him, and that for me is the real tragedy. Popular comments. Anonymous User 1 says, OP, I need you to read this very slowly. You falsely reported your fiancé to the police. You had him arrested. That is not a fit of rage, it is not a dramatic fight, it is not a mistake that is over now. It is a calculated act of violence that can ruin a person's life forever. An arrest, even if the charges are dropped, can remain on his record. It can affect his job, his future opportunities. You use the legal system as a weapon to punish him for going for a drive. He is not being dramatic. He is running to save his life from an incredibly dangerous and manipulative person. You are the one at fault on a level rarely seen around here. Response from the original poster. Violence, dangerous. That is ridiculous. It was an act of desperation, not calculated malice. I was not thinking clearly. And most importantly, I already fixed it. The charges are dropped, there is no record. Legally, it is as if it never happened. He is clinging to the emotion of the moment instead of the reality of the current situation, which is that the problem is resolved. Anonymous User 2 says, but it is over now. I dropped the charges. Girl, you do not understand how the real world works. You cannot just unarrest someone. You have created a trauma for him that will probably last for years. And the scariest part is that you keep downplaying it. You call it a stupid mistake, as if you spilled coffee on his shirt, not as if you tried to ruin his life. He does not owe you forgiveness. He owes you a restraining order. Anonymous User 3 says, the part where you say that he has always understood your outbursts is key. What was probably happening is that he tolerated them. He put up with your toxic behavior because he loved you. But this time you crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. You showed him that your anger has no limits and that you are willing to destroy him to win a fight. He is not being dramatic, he is a survivor. Response from the original poster. It was not toxic, it was passionate. And he loved that passion. He just did not know how to handle it when it turned against him. And no, I was not trying to destroy him, I was trying to get him to come back. It was a wake-up call, not an assassination attempt. People here are so dramatic. Anonymous User 4 says, please seek professional help. Seriously, your perception of your own actions is completely distorted. What you did is abuse, and the fact that you cannot see it is the most concerning thing of all. Update 1. 2 months later. It has been 2 months since my world exploded. 2 months of absolute silence from Marcos and his family. I have been living in a kind of limbo, waiting for him to come to his senses. The comments on my post called me dangerous, abusive, toxic. I ignored them. They were strangers who did not know our passion, our love. I was sure that Marcos, my Marcos, would eventually remember the good times and realize he was overreacting. That illusion was shattered last week. I received a certified letter. It was not from Marcos, it was from a lawyer. I thought it would be about the division of our assets from the apartment, but no. Marcos is suing me. He is suing me civilly for defamation and for the emotional and legal costs resulting from my false report. The letter detailed, with a legalistic coldness, how his arrest, though brief, forced him to inform his employer, a security company with strict background checks, which has put him on a probationary period and has damaged his reputation. He is claiming an amount of money I could not pay in 10 years. And that is not all. The letter was accompanied by a temporary restraining order. I cannot contact him. I cannot go near his house or his work. Reading those papers was like a physical blow. I believed that by dropping the charges the matter was legally resolved. How naive I was. You cannot just undo something like that. My 5-minute fit of rage has had real, lasting, and apparently very expensive consequences. A part of me, the one that everyone here seems to see, knows that this is serious, that I crossed a terrible line. But another part of me, the one that still loves Marcos and remembers our 5 years together, can only see this as an act of immense cruelty. Suing me, a restraining order. Against me, his fiancée. This is no longer about being hurt. This is a declaration of war. It is a calculated attempt to destroy me, to punish me in the most public and humiliating way possible. The comments said he was running for his life. But this is not running, this is fighting back, this is getting revenge. The good, patient man I knew has disappeared, replaced by this vengeful stranger who uses lawyers and courts instead of talking. Does he not see that this only makes things worse? Does he not see that he is pushing me even further to the edge? I admitted my mistake. I fixed it legally as best I could, and his response is this: total annihilation. He still does not understand that my action was a cry of pain, not an act of malice. And now his response is an act of pure malice. And that somehow makes me feel less guilty and more of a victim than ever. Update 2. It has been almost a year since the night that changed everything. There is no longer a wedding, no fiancé, and my life is unrecognizable. The civil lawsuit was settled out of court. I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement and pay a considerable sum for which my parents had to help me, mortgaging part of their house. The humiliation is total. The restraining order is still in effect. I have lost friends. I have lost my reputation. I have spent months in mandatory therapy as part of the agreement to avoid criminal charges for the false report. And yes, I have learned. I have learned that actions have consequences. I have learned that anger is a fire that burns the one who holds it first. I have learned that I cannot use my temper as an excuse. I understand all that. I accept that what I did was monstrous. But here is the truth I have unearthed after months of digging through the rubble of our relationship. Marcos knew exactly who I was, and he liked it. For 5 years. My passion, my fire, my drama was what kept the relationship alive. He was not the calm to my storm. He was the one who enjoyed watching the show from a safe distance. He loved being the good, patient man who handled the wild girl. It gave him a sense of moral superiority, of control. My outbursts were the spice of his predictable life. The night of the report, I did not scare myself, I scared him. Because for the first time the storm did not stay within the walls of our house. It splashed out into the real world. It threatened his public image, his job, his reputation as a perfect man. Marcos did not leave me because I was dangerous to him. He left me because I became dangerous to his image. As long as my madness was private, it was exciting. When it became public, it was a liability. His legal reaction, the lawsuit, the restraining order, was not an act of self-protection, it was an act of public relations. It was his way of distancing himself from me, of presenting himself to the world as the clear and unequivocal victim, erasing any trace of the dynamic he himself had fostered for years. It was damage control. So yes, I pulled the trigger, but he was the one who handed me the loaded gun and told me for 5 years that he liked how dangerous I seemed. I no longer try to justify my action. It was unforgivable, but I have stopped seeing him as the innocent victim. We were two toxic people dancing a dysfunctional tango, and I just stepped on his foot too hard. He was no better than me. He was just smarter about managing the consequences. And that is the only lesson that really matters in the end. Hey, before you go, if you liked this story, you will surely like this one here more. Do not forget to subscribe, and we will see you in the next piece of gossip.